Hi, is that Ms. Clark? I
It
can
is.
hear you. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning.
We can hear you.
Great. Just wanted to say hello, good morning. Thank you for coming. I'm going to pass this over to the presenters, but reach out to me if you have any questions. I hope everything is going well on your journey. Remember, tclark@nocca.com. Good to see you.
Great, and it's great to meet you, Ms. Clark. I'm glad that you were able to join us today. My name is Ann Carmichael, and I am going to be presenting today on the college financial aid process. I just wanted to let you know that today's presentation is sponsored by LELA, Louisiana's nonprofit resource for FAFSA completion and college access. Now, because college can be expensive, we need to start thinking about, and you need to start preparing for those costs. And they're going to include your equipment, books and supplies, personal expenses, room and board, and tuition and fees. That's the big one. So remember that as you're searching for prospective colleges, you most often will see their tuition listed, but you need to keep in mind the other expenses that you might incur. But the good news is that financial aid is available from the federal government, the state of Louisiana, your college or career school, and nonprofit and private organizations like LELA. Now, there are three types of student financial aid. There's free money, borrowed money, and earned money. Types of federal student aid include the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, and then federal work study and direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. The federal grant family includes Pell Grants, which are for undergraduates with financial need, FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need. Service grants are for students of military parents who died defending the country following 9/11, and then Teach grants for students pursuing a teaching career. The federal work study program provides part-time on-campus and off-campus jobs to help the student pay for his education expenses. So when you answer yes on the FAFSA to federal work study, the financial aid office will consider you for available jobs on their campus. Your earnings from those jobs are going to be paid directly to you, the student, and you should use that money to help pay for your college expenses. And I want to add that these jobs look great on your first professional resume. So if you're going to a four-year college and you accept a federal work study job, say it's in the financial aid office, that is 4 years of work study, professional work to add to your first resume. And nobody wants to have to borrow, but if you can't complete your college degree without student loans, then they are a good investment. It's just important to remember to borrow only what you need to complete your education. And it's important to understand the different types of loans that you might be offered. Direct subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is charged until the student graduates or ceases to attend. On the other hand, almost everyone is eligible for direct unsubsidized loans. These loans do begin to accrue interest once they're fully dispersed, which is usually the spring semester of each academic year, and then interest accrues throughout the life of the loan. So you can see that there is a big difference between direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So when you're receiving your financial aid offers, it's possible that you'll be offered both. You just want to remind yourself that the U in unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest on that loan. If you do make the decision to accept loans to fund your education, you always want to accept the federal student loan portion first, because payments aren't due until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed at a lower rate, and no credit check is required. Private loans should be accepted only as needed because some lenders are going to ask that payments be made while you're still in school. The interest rate might be variable and often it's higher, and they almost always require a cosigner. So make sure you're doing your research before selecting a private lender. Student financial aid can be used at four-year public and private colleges, community colleges, career and technical schools for part-time and online courses. And all federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the free application for federal student aid known as the Fafsa. Now, student financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis, so make sure that you are getting your Fafsa submitted as soon as possible. And remember to pay close attention to and meet your Fafsa deadlines. Your colleges are going to have priority financial aid deadlines. The TOPS scholarship, which is funded by the state, does have a Fafsa deadline as well. And yes, the Fafsa can be used as your TOPS application. And federal student aid has a financial aid deadline. Also, check with Mrs. Clark to see if your school has a financial aid, a Fafsa submission deadline to meet your graduation requirements. Now, a student must be one of the following to complete a Fafsa and be eligible for federal student aid: a U.S. citizen or U.S. national, have a green card, or have an arrival departure record, or have a battered immigrant status, or have a T visa. Now, if you have one of these documents, you can submit a Fafsa. But let's say your parents do not. You can, excuse me, you can still submit a Fafsa. However, anywhere a parent's social security number is asked for, you will enter zeros. Now, it's important to remember that only students and parents with a social security card can electronically sign the Fafsa. You'll want to begin the Fafsa process by collecting all of the documents that you need to complete the form, so that it should take no longer than 30 to 45 minutes to submit. Those documents are going to include the student and parents' social security cards, because you must report your name and number exactly as it's printed on your most recent social security card. The student and parents' 2020 federal income tax returns, if you filed one. And if you don't have a copy of your tax return, now is a good time to ask your tax preparer for a duplicate copy. The student and parents should have their 2020 W-2s, because there's information on this form that might not be found on your federal tax return. And then bank statements and records of investments, because you must report the balances of these accounts as of the date you submit your Fafsa. You're going to want to begin by creating your federal student aid ID. It's called the Fsa Id, and it's going to allow the student and one of his parents to electronically sign the Fafsa. The ID is going to consist of a username and a password that you will create using only your personal information, and you don't want to share any information. So you'll notice in the Fsa Id, there is a section for of course, your email address and your mobile phone number. That's easy. Students, remember to use your personal email addresses because once school's out, you're not going to have access to your school email. And don't use your parents' mobile phone as the alternate phone number on the ID. That is an option to enter an alternate phone, but you don't want to enter a number that belongs to anyone else. As I mentioned, each student and one of his parents needs to create an Fsa ID. This ID is your official electronic signature and it is legally binding. So you want to make sure that you are recording it because you're going to need it every year that you complete your FAFSA, but that you're keeping it in a very safe place. Be sure not to share it with anyone. You don't want anybody else to have access to your federal student aid. If you don't have access to a computer, download the Fafsa mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and it's really easy to use to submit your FAFSA. Now this happens every year. On October 1st, people are eager to get their FAFSAs done, and sometimes, for some reason, those that are on the web-based version of the FAFSA are finding some issues. So if you have trouble on the web-based version at fafsa.gov, download that mobile app. Now, if the student prefers to use the mobile app and mom or dad prefers the web-based version, that's fine. You can each work independently because once it's time to sign and submit your FAFSA, all the information will be integrated. You'll want to identify your role when you log into the FAFSA. Now, if you're the parent and you have permission to complete the entire FAFSA for the student, please select I am the student and want to access the FAFSA form. That way you can see every section within the FAFSA itself. You're going to be asked to begin by logging in with the student's FSA ID because the FAFSA is the student's application for federal student aid. It has occurred on occasion that a parent enters his FSA ID. And the problem with that is that now the colleges listed on the FAFSA think mom or dad is going to be interested in receiving federal student aid. So remember to use the student's FSA ID. Also remember that the class of 2022 should complete the 22-23 FAFSA. You're going to see two options. If you complete the 21-22 FAFSA, the college is going to think you're interested in financial aid for this academic year, and you haven't graduated yet. So make sure that you're completing the 22-23 FAFSA, and if you're attending a Louisiana public high school, the 22-23 FAFSA is the one that meets your graduation requirement. You'll also see on this page that you have access to your FSA ID status. You can see that in this case, this student's FSA ID information has matched with Social Security Administration. You might find that you've moved or you have a new phone number. You can always manage your ID, make those contact changes, and then get started on your FAFSA. Now, the first thing you'll be asked to do is to create a save key. This is a short series of letters or numbers, or both, and it serves as an additional layer of security. So if you don't complete and submit your FAFSA in the one setting, you're going to need to re-enter your save key to be able to go back and look at your saved work and continue on. So make sure you're creating your save key and then keeping it in a safe place. The FAFSA itself has 7 sections that need to be completed before submitting it. And the information that you use to create your FSA ID must match exactly what you're entering into the FAFSA, or you're going to have trouble signing and submitting a completed FAFSA. Now, this means that the name, the Social Security number, date of birth, email address, and phone number need to be exactly what you've entered in that ID. Those sections include the student demographics, where the student will be asked to provide his Social Security number, name, date of birth, email address, home address, residency status, and gender. Then you'll move to the school selection section, where you'll be asked to name your high school, the colleges that you would like your FAFSA data to be sent to, and your housing plans on each of those campuses. The dependency status section, where the student will be asked to consider a list of questions which will determine whether he is dependent or independent for FAFSA purposes. And I'm going to go over those 10 questions in just a moment. You'll be asked to report the number of dependents living in the student's household and his parents' education completion level so that the college can determine whether this student is a first-generation college student. You'll then move over into the parent demographics, where the parent or parents will report their social security number or numbers, their name or names, their marital status, and an email address. You'll then move to the parent financial section, where the parent will be asked to report his working wages from 2020, any federal benefits that the family has received, and then the balances of savings and investment accounts. Now, next you'll move to the student financial section, and this causes some people an issue. I just want to give you a warning. This section looks exactly like the parent financial section. So say you completed the parent financial section, you logged back in, and you're going to do the student section. Because it's a mirror image of the parent questions asked, make sure that you can see that they're asking for the student's information, because the students will be asked to report their working wages from 2020 if they received any federal benefits they received, and then of course the balance of their savings and investment accounts. Then it is almost time to sign and submit the Fafsa, but you want to make sure that you are reviewing your Fafsa summary before you submit. This report is going to show every question that you were asked and your answer to each of those. So by reviewing this report, you're going to ensure that the financial aid office receives the most accurate information so that they can quickly process your financial aid. And then it's time to sign and submit. The student and one of his parents should sign the Fafsa using their FSA IDs. And if this is a dependent student, which for this case, we're going to assume that you are a dependent student. Now, if you submit your Fafsa without these signatures, the Fafsa is going to be marked incomplete, and the colleges will not receive the data. So just make sure that you are signing before you submit. If you've listed two parents in the demographic section of the Fafsa, you are going to want to sign as the parent who created an FSA ID. Now, as you move through the Fafsa itself, you'll see a question mark beside every question you're asked. If you need a better description, click on that question mark. And also use the hyperlinks that are provided, because there are probably financial aid terms and legal terms that you may not have come across before. You can request a Fafsa online chat, you can call Federal Student Aid, or you can contact me on Leela's Fafsa helpline, and I'll be happy to help you. Only the colleges that you list on your Fafsa in that school selection section are going to consider you for financial aid. So make sure that you're adding all of the colleges that you are considering. Even if you haven't completed the admissions application yet, go ahead and list them. That information, your financial and demographic information from the Fafsa, is just going to be held there in the office until you complete the admissions process. Then they can draw it down and begin working on a financial aid offer for you. Now, to determine whether the student is dependent or independent for Fafsa purposes, you're going to be asked to consider these statements. Will you, the student, be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for financial aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree during the academic year in which you are applying for aid? Do you have children or other dependents who receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? Are you a veteran of the armed forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a ward or a dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor, or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? And remember that legal custody is not always considered legal guardianship. So make sure you have your documentation with you when you're answering these questions. And then the last one, are you an unaccompanied youth who's homeless, or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Now, if your school district has identified you in one of these categories, make sure that you talk to your counselor and ask her for a copy of that documentation, because the financial aid office will ask you for it. Now, if you can answer yes to just one of these questions and provide that legal document supporting your claim, then you're considered an independent student for Fafsa purposes, and you will not be required to provide parental information. Now, what if you live with grandparents or other relatives or other friends who are not your legal guardians and they have not legally adopted you? You must still provide information about your biological parents. So if those who you live with are your legal guardians, then you're independent and you do not have to provide any parental information whatsoever. Now, if the people that you live with have legally adopted you, then those people should be listed on your FAFSA because they're your legal parents. If they haven't, then you still need to provide your biological parents' information. Now, for FAFSA purposes, you're not considered an independent student simply because you may file your own taxes or you choose to live on your own and you support yourself. You still must be able to answer one of the prior questions to receive federal and student financial aid. And then the most commonly asked question that we receive is, which parent or parents should I list on my FAFSA? The parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. Let me go back. So if you live with both of your biological parents, of course, you're going to list both of them. But if the parent that you lived with the longest in the past 12 months is either separated, divorced, or was never married, you should list just that parent on your FAFSA. However, if that parent is now remarried, you must include your step-parent, because federal student aid wants to know the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to the date that the FAFSA was submitted. If you're identified as a dependent student, but your parents will not provide their parental information, you can submit a FAFSA, but you must contact your college's financial aid office to talk to them about that situation. Because if you don't make contact with them, you will only be offered the unsubsidized student loan. And we want to make sure that you all are offered for the need-based aid as well. Remember that the FAFSA is only a vehicle to gather your demographic and financial information and provide it to your college financial aid office. The college is going to make your aid offer, so don't skip this step. To expedite the processing of your federal student aid, the student and parents are encouraged to use the IRS data retrieval tool to provide your income. Now, this is if you filed a return. Now, using this tool is going to greatly diminish your chances of being selected for verification by your college financial aid office. If you're having trouble using this tool, oftentimes it's because the information in the Fsa Id is not matching what's in the FAFSA itself. So go back and check that. But if you're continuing to have trouble using this tool, call me on Leela's Fafsa helpline. I have a couple of tips to share with you. Now, this is your choice to transfer your information, but I will tell you, if you choose not to use this tool, your colleges are going to ask you to go to the IRS website, request a tax transcript that they can use to verify your manually entered information. Once you are in the IRS portal, this is where you need to grab your 2020 federal income tax return, because you have to enter your name, address, zip, city, everything exactly as it's listed on your tax return. Even if your name was misspelled, which we've seen a tax preparer do, or say you've moved since that return was filed. Sometimes if the word on if your, say, street is spelled out on your tax return, but you abbreviate it in the IRS site, you're not going to be successful using this tool. So make sure you have that tax return with you when you attempt this. And once you submit your FAFSA, you're going to automatically receive your confirmation page. Please print this page or take a screenshot for your records, because you'll see that there's a confirmation date and time and a data release number. And if for some reason your college notifies you that they haven't received your FAFSA, you can pull this up. You can see that the school is listed here, and you can tell them the date and time you submitted your FAFSA, and even provide them with that data release number. And one other thing about the data release number, this is the only place you're going to be provided it. The college can actually make FAFSA changes for you if you need them to. Now, once your FAFSA is fully processed, at that time, it's going to be shared with your colleges. And this usually takes 3 to 5 days once you submit a completed FAFSA. Then each of the financial aid counselors will begin to identify any aid that you might be eligible to receive on their campus. If you want to make a change at a school, update your contact information once you've submitted your FAFSA, it's easy to do. Just log back into fafsa.gov, make those changes, but remember, you always must sign and submit your FAFSA for the information to be resubmitted to your colleges. If your family's financial situation has changed since 2020, contact your financial aid counselor, because they have the ability to adjust your aid by using their own professional judgment. But this is your responsibility to contact them, and they're great to work with, just like your high school counselors. This is their job, and they want to make sure that you receive all the aid that you are eligible to receive. Because they're trying to determine your net price on their campus. And they're going to do this by subtracting any grants and scholarships that they can offer you from your cost of attendance at their school. Now, this net price is your responsibility to pay, whether it's in cash or by accepting student loans. The student will receive a financial aid offer from each of the schools listed on his FAFSA. So when you begin to receive these offers, they're not all going to look the same, but they should all show the cost of attendance at that college and line item, any grants, scholarships, work study, and student loans that you've been offered. Make sure you read these awards carefully and that you respond to any requests from the college for additional information. And once you determine where you're going to college, you want to accept your financial aid in this order: scholarships and grants, because this is gift aid that doesn't have to be repaid; federal work study, because you're earning this money and you don't have to pay it back; and then loans, because this is borrowed money that must be repaid with interest. Now, scholarships are gifts that don't have to be repaid, so now is the time to begin your search. They're offered by colleges, employers, private and nonprofit companies, community, religious, and social organizations, to name a few. Some are going to be based on merit, awarded on your academic achievement, or some special talent or trait that you might have. Others are going to be based on financial need. And winning these scholarships is going to reduce the cost of your education, which means minimizing your student loan debt. This year, Leela will award a $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship for seniors attending a Louisiana high school and a $1,000 Choose Louisiana scholarship for students attending a college in the state of Louisiana, because we want to keep you here. You can grab the application and find out more about the details of these scholarships at leela.org. If you want a copy of the applications, you can email me directly and I'm happy to send those over to you. In just a second, I'm going to provide you with my contact information. Now, for students or parents who need additional help paying for college after accepting all scholarships, grants, federal and state dollars, Leela does administer a nonprofit education loan program called Leela Choice, and it's for Louisiana residents. And you can find out more about that at leelachoice.org. And then remember, to keep receiving financial aid, you must complete the FAFSA every year that you're in college. Now, I know this is a lot of information, so please contact me if you're interested in a copy of Leela's FAFSA completion guide for the class of 2022. It's free and we are happy to send it over to you. Please make sure that you're jotting down Leela's FAFSA helpline so that if you have questions about the process, or perhaps you want me to stay on the line with you as you complete your FAFSA, I'm happy to do that. Also, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, I'll be happy to forward that on to you as well. Now, I would like to use the rest of our time to answer any questions that you might have. Or if you've already completed your FAFSA and submitted it, let us know how it went. So I'm going to turn it over to you all and I'm going to check the chat box. Oh, I think I just answered this question. Yes, I'll be happy to send the presentation to any attendee that will send a request to my email address, and I'm going to drop it in the chat box. Oh, you completed your FAFSA last year and you got selected for verification. I know. You know, the colleges and universities are responsible for awarding these federal dollars. And because they're doing that, they have to verify almost every answer on your FAFSA. So students do find themselves in this situation. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions about what might make it easier for to go through the verification process, but don't get overwhelmed. Just go one step at a time, providing them with the information. You're not in trouble. They just need to have that record that they have verified your information in their files. All right, and let me resend my email address. I sent it directly to Mrs. Clark. Most often we have parents and students that need a little bit of help identifying which parent or parents to report on their FAFSA, as I mentioned. Sometimes they are unsure about some of the financial questions that they're being asked about. But if you go over to the question mark beside each question, especially in that financial section, say they're asking about your investments or to list the balance of certain investments. It will list the form number. It will list the name of the investment account, the type of investment account. So just make sure that you're taking full advantage of those additional descriptions identified by each question mark. I'm trying to think what else we are asked about a lot. That Linking your tax information is often tricky. So make sure you're taking care of that just one step at a time, but always know that there is a lot of assistance for you. I know Mrs. Clark is there for you as well as we are, and federal student aid. Okay, so I'm having a request to review the IRS data retrieval tool instructions. So let me see if I can quickly get back there. Did I pass it up? Okay. I think I passed it up. What you're going to see is once you first enter the parent financial section, they're going to ask you here if you filed a tax return in 2020. If you did, of course, you're going to use that drop-down box to state already completed. You'll tell them the type of income tax return that you completed and your tax filing status. Once you do that, you will be, if you're eligible, you'll be offered the option to link to the IRS. If you choose to do that, you will be entering your FSA ID. So if it's the parent financial section, you'll enter the parent's FSA ID, which will then take you to the IRS website if you are successful. And once you're there, that's when you'll grab your 2020 income tax return and enter the information they ask for. Your name, your date of birth, if that's correct. Some of the information is going to be pre-populated. So just verify it and then enter the street, city, state, zip exactly as it's printed on that tax return. Then you will press continue to the continue through the process, and it will leave the FAFSA and it will take you directly to the IRS. It'll grab exactly what it needs and it will populate the FAFSA with that information. You will see in bold, transferred from the IRS by any question that they are able to pull from your from the IRS site, from your tax return. Now, there are other questions within the financial section, depending upon your situation, that you may have to manually enter. So make sure you're going through each of those questions. They're going to automatically be set at 0, but if you do, say, have a balance of cash savings or any anything in your checking account, you'll be asked to add that dollar amount up and place it in that box. Okay, let me go up one. Should parents disclose the investment or rental properties? What you're going to be asked to do, and you're not going to be asked to provide the value of your family home, but if you do have investment properties, you will have to provide the value of that home. And it won't be what it's actually worth. They're going to ask you what is the value of it, and then you will subtract any amount that you do owe on the value of it. You don't have to go out and get an appraisal, but you will be asked what the value is. Let me scroll down. Oh, I see that a student was trying to send her FAFSA information to a new school after she already completed her FAFSA. All right, when you complete your FAFSA, you do have to wait the 3 to 5 days for it to process. And if you're logging back in, you'll get a notification that it's still processing or that it has been processed. Once it's been processed, you will see on that home page that you can add a school. You won't be starting a new FAFSA. You will just be making that change to your FAFSA. You go directly to that school selection section and you go through the same process. You add the new school, and you tell them your housing plans for that school. Now, if you see schools that you previously listed, because you can only list 10 schools at a time when in that school selection section. If you were applying to, multiple colleges, many colleges, you do have to go in and remove the first 10, add the next 10, sign and submit your Fafsa again. And if you want help as you're going through this, please feel free to give me a call. I'll be happy to do that. If both parents are married and living at home, both filing jointly, then isn't this information checked together? So it doesn't matter which parent's info is entered. Does it matter if one parent makes more money than the other? If you are married filing jointly and you're in this section, the parent section, you'll list that and it'll tell you that you're eligible to use that IRS data retrieval tool. It's gonna, if you use the tool, it'll go grab that information and yes, it'll put the lump sum of what was listed on your tax return if you file jointly married. And you won't have to worry about that. However, I will tell you that one of the questions that they're going to ask you is, how much did parent one make? How much did parent two make? So then you want to grab your W-2s, see who's listed as parent one, enter their income for that tax year, and do the same with parent two. Don't ask me why they need to know what each parent made, independent of the other, but they do ask that. So make sure you have your W-2s with you. If you choose not to use this tool, then, that's fine. They'll tell you exactly what line you need to pull for each question. And in some instances this year, this is new in the Fafsa, they will actually show a copy of the IRS tax return. They'll show you what it looks like, and then they'll highlight that line and say, okay, we need your adjusted gross income. Grab your return, look on line 11, and you put that dollar amount. It's not difficult. The Fafsa is not difficult unless you, or have a lot of investments and rental properties. It can get tedious, but that's a good word to use. The Fafsa is tedious. You kind of just have to take it slowly, one question at a time, and remember to review that Fafsa summary before you submit. Oh, you do think this student thinks that she may have been selected for verification because she switched so many schools. Now, are you saying that you went to one university and then you left and went to another university, or that you kept adding schools? But I'll tell you that because financial aid is awarded by the different colleges themselves, because what happens is the Department of Education gives lump sums of money to each college, and then they're responsible for awarding it. So a lot of times, if you started at LSU and then you moved over to UNO, it's a whole new process. LSU might ask a couple of verification questions. UNO might have additional questions to ask you. So I see that this student was not in that situation now that I'm reading, but she continued to add new schools. And I haven't heard about that before, but I certainly will ask around to see if that is a common reason why a student will be selected for verification. Do you remember what questions you were asked? Because if a school does find that you need to verify some information, they will send you a form and they will show you exactly what you need to report. You didn't use the IRS data retrieval tool, so this is your chance to use it now and resubmit your Fafsa, or contact the IRS and get a tax transcript. Some students might be asked to verify the number of dependents in their household. That can be a tricky question. And sometimes students 1 year will say there are, 5 dependents in my home, and then the next year there are only 3. Anytime anything, is flagged that looks different than prior years or that you previously stated, that can also trigger verification. They can verify anything if they have to. And every college has their own procedure that they have to go by. I had to fill out the form for each school and send them the IRS information. Yeah. If you don't use that data retrieval tool, you are going to have to verify it with the IRS. See, we have an expert here with us. She's already been through it. Anybody else? I am happy to stay on the line. If you all do not have questions and you want to leave our session, please feel free. I'll just stay on as long as you need me. And Mrs. Clark, do you have anything else for me or for your students? Oh, yes, Ms. Clark is asking that each student remember to send the verification. Is it that verification email that they receive once they submit, Ms. Clark? Yes, that's the one. And you can speak up, Ms. Clark, and just have the floor if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, so just remember, if you're an academic studio, the verification that you've completed the FAFSA, you have to send it to us so that you can graduate, essentially. And you can also just take a screenshot of that or forward it, whatever works for you. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. And thank you for this presentation.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Okay, we have one holder on. So if you have something that you want to talk about or tell us about, please feel free to do that. If not, you can email me directly and we can begin a dialogue that way.
I will send you an email about this, but I would love to have a copy of that completion guide for our office.
Absolutely, and I'll be happy to send you a copy of the slide deck and
Yes.
the recorded copy of the presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome.
That'd be really great.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the session then, and I hope everybody has a great Saturday.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.